Before you book anything for your Philippines trip, the flight, hotels, or the tours, pause. Because Philippines is not a country where you can just land and figure it out. The domestic flights are limited, the ferries are timed, and some routes are shockingly expensive. And if you don't plan smartly and ahead of time, you can end up losing up to 2 to 3 days just in traveling. So in this video, I am breaking down exactly how to plan your Philippines trip. This is basically your complete Philippines travel guide before you book anything, and cover some important point of discussions like where should you take the entry from, where should be your exit from, about the domestic flights and ferry routes, and how should you structure your days in Philippines so that you make the most of it and also helps you save time, money and stress. So let's get started. Let us start with the big question. Where should you enter and exit Philippines from? So Philippines have two main entry points for international travelers, that is Manila and Cebu. So this part is more about Manila versus Cebu. There is no right and wrong in this, and the right answer depends upon what kind of experience are you looking forward to have in Philippines, and it can literally change your entire itinerary and the experience that you have in the country. So now Manila have the maximum international flight options, and it also have the great connectivity to the must-visit Palawan region through Puerto Princesa airport, with up to 3 to 7 flights operating between Manila and PPS airport daily. So it can be considered as the most reliable and frequent option if you want to visit Palawan during your trip. So with this option, you can reach El Nido with a 6 or 7 hours of van ride, including the wait time and everything. Manila also offer direct flights to Coron and El Nido, but they are limited and mostly are one stop via CRK or Cebu. And sometimes they are very expensive as well, especially Manila to El Nido.
When he just lost it and was thinking कि ये मनीला एंड फिलीपींस क्यों जाने का सोचा हमने, है ना?
कैसा बना रखा है?
फ्लाइट्स ही नहीं है ना?
नहीं फ्लाइट्स हैं, लेकिन ये बोल रहे हैं कि आप हर जगह की फ्लाइट लेने के बाद वापस मनीला हो फिर उसके बाद आगे कहीं जाओ.
The only thing to be careful of at the Manila airport is that it is very crowded because of the number of flights that go in and out of the airport, and the transfer between the terminals can be messy and complicated. Although there are free shuttle bus, but then you have to figure out a lot if you want to take a transfer there. Now, Cebu provides smoother airport experience in general and have better connectivity to Coron and El Nido. There are a couple of direct flights daily between Cebu and El Nido and Coron. So getting directly to these places is much easier from Cebu than Manila. Although the options are fewer, but they are direct and are comparatively on the cheaper side when compared to Manila. Now, Cebu is a great option if you want to explore the central Philippines. The only problem that I felt with Cebu is that there are little less options for the international flights when compared to Manila, but then it is growing up rapidly. Therefore, it could be a viable option to land in Cebu. So when traveling from India, you usually connect via Singapore, Hong Kong, Kuala Lumpur, or Bangkok. You can pick any entry point to Philippines as per your itinerary. So Air India have recently started the direct flights between New Delhi and Manila. This can immediately change your planning because people may prefer direct flights to Manila. But then again, I would say a lot depends upon your itinerary, and you can choose your entry point based on what you actually want to do in Philippines. And honestly, a part of the reason why I'm making this video is because our flight wasn't a direct any which ways. We should have preferred Cebu as an entry point because that was better options. We were getting better flights, and itinerary could have been better if that was the case. But unfortunately, I could not find any such video. Now let us understand the geography of the country. Because if you don't understand this, everything else becomes confusing. Philippines have more than 7,000 islands, and there is no way that you can visit all of them in a single go. So you have to prioritize what you actually want to see and experience in Philippines. While planning what you want to visit, you have to make sure that you have to account for the time that it takes to travel between places. And on screen, I have put together the different places by the interest category, so you can choose what you want to visit during your trip. Now, Philippines have multiple domestic airlines, but one thing that you have to check is that not all the routes run daily. So they have certain frequency in the week, and the flight which you may see today may not be available tomorrow. And the smaller airports like the Port Barton Airport or the El Nido Airport operates on limited schedule, and the weather delays are common, so you technically cannot decide on the last minute where you want to travel. And because of all these complexities, certain routes are expensive and others are affordable, but with increased travel time. So for each route, you really have to weigh your pros and cons of whether you want to save time or money. So let me tell you, for example, you can get from Manila to Coron often in INR 3000 or equivalent, while Manila to El Nido is somewhere around 7 to 8,000 or equivalent. However, Manila to Puerto Princesa is cheaper, just 3000 INR or equivalent, but then it takes about 5 or 6 hour of van journey to El Nido, which is time consuming. The difference in the price is mainly because of the more number of flights and the carriers flying on the route between Manila and EPS. So if you're planning a Palawan itinerary, there is one more extremely important thing, is that the two main places of Palawan, the Coron and El Nido, are not very well connected by flight. So there are no cheap and direct flights between Coron and El Nido. So it will be like you fly from Coron to Manila and to El Nido. So this becomes extremely expensive and time consuming, and essentially nobody does that. So the only way that you get between two places is through ferry. And even though the ferries are most common way to travel between El Nido and Coron, but they are limited. At this point in time, let me clearly explain the ferry situation between Coron and El Nido, because that is extremely important, because it is not highlighted in most of the places, and I think people do get confused here as well. So usually from either side there are only 3 or 4 departures per day, and they are during the specific time of the day. So often the morning departures are only from Coron. So you cannot realistically take a late morning or afternoon or evening ferry from Coron to El Nido. It has to be in the morning hours, like I think up to 9 a.m. or so. So there's no ferry after that. So what this means is that the Coron to El Nido day must start early for you. And on the return side from El Nido to Coron, the sailing probably starts from around midday to late afternoon. So the common departure from El Nido are around 12 or 12:30 in the afternoon. Some operators may have early afternoon options as well, depending upon the season and the service needed. But then that is very optional. So essentially, it's like you cannot say at 4 p.m., oh, let's go to the other part of Palawan. You cannot do that. You don't have that flexibility. So you have to plan at least a couple of days in advance. And what if the weather is bad? The ferries are cancelled. And that is why you should not keep Coron and El Nido too tight on schedule. Allow yourself a couple of days extra for these unforeseen scenarios that might happen on your trip. This is the part most people don't do research on. We were in Coron and the terrestrial rain hit. All the ferries between Coron and El Nido were cancelled for 3 whole days. So ferries between Coron and El Nido take around 5 to 6 hours minimum. That includes boarding and deboarding. Therefore, the first thing while planning a Philippines trip is to make sure that you know what you really want to experience and where all you will be visiting, because you have to figure out the route for yourself, and you'll also be getting your ferries and flights based out of it. So I would say plan your internal transfers first and then book your hotel. So it will be like it cannot be a half day in Coron, but it could be a early morning in El Nido. I hope I'm making sense to you, right? We spend a lot of time in planning out a route and trying to balance travel time and the cost to create an itinerary that fit our travel goals and cover all the places that we wanted to visit. And that's when we realize that whatever we do, if you want to visit multiple places, the internal transfers can take up to 2 to 3 days, and you have to be mentally prepared and account for those days while you're planning for your itinerary. So Philippines looks smaller on map, but the internal travels do take up time. Flights are not always direct and as per the time that you might need to optimize your day. So airport transfers can take up to half of your day. And if you are planning for a 7-day trip to Philippines, you will actually get somewhere around 4 or 5 days to actually experience the place. So that is why I recommend at least 10 days that you should plan to visit Philippines, and ideally 13 to 14 days. So now if you're confused that what should you actually do? Let me tell you a simple 10-day itinerary which is optimized for both time and the money. I hope this gives you some inspiration about planning your own trip. So day one is arrive in Cebu, then travel to Molbol and do the sardine run and Kawasan. Next day, go to Oslo, do the whale shark experience, and then come back in the evening and explore the Molbol line. Day 4 is to fly from Cebu to Coron. Day 5 and 6 will be the island hopping experiences that you can do there. Day 7 is early morning ferry from Coron to El Nido. Day 8 and 9 will be 2 days of your El Nido experiences, and day 10 will be your early morning start from El Nido to PPS airport to Manila and take your flight during the evening hours. Or maybe just one night there and day 11 you fly out from there. And now that I have already visited Philippines, here are my some final thoughts and tips for your Philippines trip. Number one is, I think I have iterated it multiple times already. Do not book your internal flights before confirming all the domestic flight routes and ferry routes for your trip, because you want to leave out some scope that if things don't work out for the other flights. Keep a buffer of at least a day before your international departure. And on that note, avoid same day domestic to international flight, right? Because you want to avoid any unforeseen scenarios. Also, check if the flights operate daily on the said route. Make sure that you take a note that the smaller airport means higher fare, and if you're okay to pay that. And I think sometimes Cebu could be a smarter choice to land in instead of Manila, unless you want to visit some of the northern part of the country.
What I feel after visiting Philippines is that Philippines is not a country which you can plan casually in 10 minutes over discussion, unless money and time is not a problem for you. But it requires a set of research and planning, and I think it does reward the people who do plan properly. If you understand the region and transportation and how to get along in the country, your trip will be much smoother and magical. Philippines is not expensive because of hotels. I mean, they are part of it, but not majorly, because you do get a lot of budget options like we did in our trip. But it becomes expensive because people don't understand how to get around in the country. In the next episode, I'll tell you about how we actually flew into the country, what was our immigration experience, and how did we figure out our SIM, currency. So stay tuned. And if you're planning to take this trip to Manila, make sure that you watch the next one to figure out all the essentials.